So what we're going to do is we're going to take questions from the body language membership on here. So if you have any questions in the membership, go ahead and ask them, and you can send them an email or just ask them in the in the section under where you're watching the video inside the membership, and we'll answer your questions.
You want me to start with a question?
Let's tell them who we are for people who are watching YouTube. And it's like, what is this?
Yeah.
Well, I'm Scott Rouse. I'm a body language expert and analyst, and I train law enforcement in the military in interrogation and body language. I created the #1 online body language course, Body Language Tactics, with Greg. Greg
Hartley. I'm a former Army interrogator, interrogation instructor, resistance to interrogation instructor. I've written 10 books on body language and behavior, put together the #1 body language tactics course with Scott, and this body language membership place that we're working from today.
Sounds like you're gargling tags.
It does. It's pretty bad. I've had a cold all week, as you know. I was able to cover it for the show, but here we are.
Bless your heart. Okay, well, I'll go first. And this was from Charlotte. Charlotte Cohen, and she says, have you ever watched a missing person press conference or news interview in real time and thought someone has guilty knowledge? Yes, we have. And yes, we called them. And yes, it worked. So why don't you tell them the last one you did, Greg?
Well, I think the one that stands out to me is the Malia Davis case, the one where the little girl was missing and the stepfather or father had a big knot on the middle of his head, just in the perfect spot. And he came in and his details were perfect, that everybody, it was two guys, so he couldn't fight back, and he drove off and they stole the kid, all the details were just so poor, and his body language was so poor. I sent that to Scott and said, we got to use this one. This is going to be all over the news. Yep.
It was. Good. You got one you want to do next?
Sure. Let me pull that. Bear with me a second. Saw a good one in there just a minute ago. Oh, yeah. This one is just an easy. Will you be analyzing the Idaho trials coming up? Sure. Absolutely. If we get video, the only reason we haven't covered that guy yet is because there's little to no video. You can see him walking in the courtroom. That's really not useful for what we do. We could give you, 2 minutes of what we see. But yeah, that's not what we look for.
Yeah. All right.
Linda I've met many times in the lives. Guys, one of the things you should know is Scott and I will be doing a lot more of these lives, not live Q&As like this, but where we'll just jump in and do 15 or 20 people and talk. Linda says, it's still fun doing the behavior panel, or is it starting to feel like work? Have you contributed to solving any cases recently? Well, cases not as much because we're so busy with a lot of other things. But no, this is still not work. I hope you can tell from the thing we released this week. It's fun. We all get together, and it's a great part of my week to sit there and relax and talk about body language.
Yeah, it's great because we get to hang out every week and we know it's coming. So we've got things to talk about. Not only are we going to talk about the body language videos, whatever we're going to watch and talk about, we get to talk about the superfluous things and the peripheral things that really don't have anything to do with body language. But that's the reason we did that pre-show, because we were like, we should do a pre-show and just see what it likes, because we goof around on there before we start those shows. What is it, an hour sometimes we get on there and
oh yeah, 30 minutes talk. Almost every time, just to hang out and talk.
Yeah. Yep. And then afterwards we usually do for a little while. So we're just catching up, seeing what the other ones are doing. So we decided we just go ahead and clump a piece out and put it up as an episode and see how it went. But I think it went pretty good so far. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think it was fun.
Right.
Yep.
Here's one from Angela. And she says, what do you believe about Putin having body doubles? I find this interesting. The idea of doppelgangers for celebrities, is that even possible? Surely body language baseline would give it away. That is, did you just hear that noise? Or is it on here for me? I don't, what?
What is it? What noise?
Oh, I think it's, I'm hearing me somehow in this thing, some kind of a loop every now and then it comes through. Anyway.
That's awful.
I don't know if he does or not. I've never really paid attention to that. I'm sure in some cases where he's going to be far off and he doesn't really have to be there. Why put him in danger of somebody trying to tag him when you don't have to? And I'm sure there's a lot of celebrities that do that. You've seen those people, that guy that looks like Johnny Depp. Have you ever seen that one, Greg? The guy that looks just like him. Man, it's pretty weird. But then when he talks, you realize he's not cool. He's just trying to be cool. And there's a big difference in that. So that's when you tell him. But I don't know. I never really paid attention to him having a body double. I have seen those things on Joe Biden where he's gotten his ears fixed and his lobes used to be detached, but now they're all like stuck to the side of his head. Look for those. Look for the differences there. Yeah. That's just from having facial stuff done.
I was going to say, you got to realize that as you age, your ears keep growing, and he's 80. So. Yeah. Maybe he's just had them fixed. But yeah, look, it would be very difficult for a person to truly mimic every behavior of another person. They'll mimic what they think are those behaviors. But the obvious ones, if you're a Joe Biden double, you would pop your smile and do all that, and you would do the now look. I always say the good thing about Joe Biden is I've been watching him for my whole life, and he has two things. And this is not a political statement. He's got when he's giving you and he's telling you this is like it is. And then he's got now, come on, man. Those are two demeanors that he has that you can mimic. And folks in entertainment are really good at creating caricatures of those folks and overplaying the images. What we're really not good at is the subtlety of another person's body language. It's tough. It's a lot tougher than you think.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, there's one in here, Scott, I want to hit because he's asked this in past times. Sappho asked for Greg and Scott, and you guys have to forgive my voice today. How do you control a short fuse? I get very angry when someone lies to me continuously. Is there a motivation technique I can use to calm and get your answers? So look, all that, and trust me, I'm a redhead. I came with a temper as a child, and you have to learn to control it in situations and know when and where that's acceptable and that kind of thing. It's about taking a step back and thinking and containing. And if you think they're lying, sometimes people may be using not necessarily what you consider truth. Culture matters. Depends on where you live in the world as to how much veracity matters. I think some cultures think they're more truthful than they are, and others are less. But there's in your head, you've got a little fight or flight switch. Scott would talk about the amygdala with people, but you got a little fight or flight switch. And what you have to do is figure ways to control that. A lot of times the reason we get angry is from a feeling of entitlement, not necessarily that we are entitled. We are expecting that entitlement. And when we feel they violated that, then there's a problem. Usually the relationship is the problem if somebody's lying to you constantly. It's not your entitlement or expectation. It's a relationship. And in some cases in business, people are bad liars. In other cases. So what I would say is when you feel it starting to come up, curl your toes in your shoes, do some kind of an adapter to release that nervous energy, take a beat. And every time you do that, you're re-engaging the forward part of your brain instead of the limbic brain, and you're going to act more like a human than a cat. That's my trick. How about you, Scott?
I always go back to a situation where I think, depending on what's going on, let's say, and I maybe they're asking this because of work or if you're during interrogation, possibly.
Right.
So in those situations, I keep in mind that it's a job you're doing. That's it. You have a job to do. And if you're supposed to get mad, if it works for you to be mad during that, then you get mad. Like Greg always says, interrogation is theater for one, because you're putting on a show for this person, making them believe you're there to help them or whatever's going on. So for me personally, out in the wild, it's a little bit different, but I still can disengage myself from becoming angry. Not that I wouldn't become angry, but if I know it's important and I'm not supposed to look that way, I think I can pretty much hold it in and not talk very well. Now, Greg, on the other hand, he looks normal. He looks just like he does right now until he says the word "hoss." And
that's,
when he calls you
trigger.
hoss,
I'm pissed.
You're done. Yeah. It's over. Yeah. So he's up and he's ready to roll. So that's when I would run or leave that situation. But personally, I don't get mad all the time, but mostly when it is, if we're doing videos, if we're doing an episode and we're talking about somebody who's done something to children, I don't like that at all. Nobody does, but those are the ones that get me. So, but out in the wild, it's not a game, but it's a thing where I just try to separate myself from whatever's happening and do a couple of answers to their questions and then leave it. So, but that's me. I'm a Capricorn. Here's one. This is from Jim. Question for Greg. First off, your book, Getting People to Do What You Want, is solid gold. Could you give a description of bonding and fracturing? And is that how you've used it to move people up and down Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yeah, so that is in the works. That's part 2 of the Maslow stuff I put up on the Academy, and I'll have it all up in the next 10 days. And really all bonding and fracturing are and the premise, if you don't know this premise, if you don't know the book he's talking about, and thank you first, Jim, my favorite book I've ever written because it's the underpinnings of everything we do, all the interrogation. And if you know me, I'll say body language, yeah, I like it just fine, but I'm more interested in the why people do things. And Maslow is about that. So as I look into that, I think about how do I take a person who is in belonging and use tools to either move them tighter into that belonging so they can start to establish esteem, or to move them out of that group and into a new group because they're too big a fish in a small pond, for example. And that way you're fulfilling their Maslow without them even being a participant in it in some cases. When we're doing interrogation, it's all about that. When we're doing elicitation, it's all about that. And all bonding means is making you more like the group. And all fracturing means is making you less like the group. So once you're in a group and you're accepted, fracturing can make you either pushed away and have to fight to get back, or it can make you appear to be more stellar in that group, if you will. So being a bigger fish in a small pond. And it's really a level of mastery with words. That's all you really have are words, unless you're, handling prisoners and they're locked in a cage. So by using words and pointing out that a person is more like the group that he is pretending or she is pretending to be cooler than, you are then bonding them back in a negative way. In a positive way, if a person's brand new to the group, you create some kind of rituals and norms. I've used it very effectively in corporate America, things I learned from doing team building in the military, where I make everybody go through some kind of a hurdle, some kind of a rite of passage, so they bond with the team more effectively. So those tools, I'll do a bunch of micro courses in the next 10 days. They'll all be out, already started. And then I'll do another Q&A session like I did a few weeks ago, where I just say, hey guys, if you want to come in, there are a couple of sessions, come in and ask any questions you have. Hopefully that's helpful, Jim. And yeah, it's my favorite book I've ever written too, still.
Right. And here's another one. This is from Charlotte. Should we say their last names?
I wouldn't, just because.
Okay. All right. Anyway, this is from Charlotte. She says, when you aren't in work mode, say you're on a train or getting some coffee, are you still hyper alert to people's body language and behavior, or do you switch it off? Well, say we switch it off. But going to lunch, like when Greg and I go to lunch, it's one of my favorite things, because we're the only ones we can talk to about the things we're seeing in depth. And same with Mark and Chase. That's our favorite thing, is getting together and going to eat, because if you saw us out in public, we're all at a table, all it is this, looking around and leaning and talking. We look like the most suspicious people in the whole place, because we're leaning over talking about everybody in there. So I don't turn it off. If I go into like even to Starbucks or something, I'm all the time watching for what's going to happen next. That's my wheelhouse. Watching someone's behavior and trying to figure out what they're going to do next. Are they going to be a violent person? Are they? Thank God, most 99.9% of the time they're not, but you never know. But I'm all the time looking for, since I train people to look for weapons, I'm all the time looking for weapons and see, and you can tell who to look, what you're looking at. There's a uniform. Most people with that carry a gun will wear. The people who are trained and understand how to use a gun and have a concealed carry permit, you can spot those people because they have on the uniform. And you'll see them, the beginners, you'll see them all the time picking their shirts down at the bottom, trying to make sure their gun is hidden. You can see things like that. So those kind of people, you really don't have to worry about. It's that person, you see something that's sticking outside their shirt or in the front of their pants, and they don't have a holster, and you can tell that there's no holster to it. Those are the ones you got to pay attention to. One time, Greg and I were in Nashville, and we were doing shooting the stuff for the course for body language tactics.
Right.
And we went to eat lunch at this place. And as we're sitting there eating lunch, we saw this whole scene go down of a guy walking from his car, walking in, walking out. And so of course, we're both ready. If anything was going to happen, nothing did, thank goodness. But there was something happening there. I don't know if he couldn't make up his mind about what he was going to do or what, but it got kind of iffy there for a minute. But we were aware of what was happening. So it's always important to stay aware. Greg, what do you think about all that?
Yeah, the thing I would say is this. Remember, human beings are lots and lots of layers and lots of reasons why things are going on. So I try to look at what's so-called normal. If something's out of the norm for a person, and by that I mean sudden change. Remember, I'm the baseline king. That's all I think of as baseline. I watch a person if they're acting a certain way, and then there's a glitch, I pay attention. To Scott's point, the guy getting up and going back and going back and going back, you're like, wait a minute, there's some hesitation. What's going on? Now, does that mean he's going to do something criminal? No, but it could mean that something's going on in his head. He may have an issue, may be fighting with his wife or partner on the phone. So you just don't know. But it's always, for me, there are a handful of things that just stand out, and that's when you turn it on. And I would tell you, I'm better at turning it off than most folks. My wife will say, hey, go turn on all your stuff and go talk to that guy. So it depends. It depends on the situation, whether I'm in a place where I need to be hyper vigilant. If I'm driving my car in certain areas, I'm cautious then, and I pay a lot of attention because there are a bunch of carjackers in certain parts of Atlanta, and you just got to be careful with. But yeah, it depends on situation as much as anything, and where you're at. Okay, let's see. What advice this is from Hussein. What advice can you give me on how to catch liars? Is there any training or exercise I can do? We spend our whole life teaching people to catch liars. Remember, if you go in and you look at the liar's loop, and that's in the academy, we talk to you about the mechanics of how a person lies, because no two lies are identical. Lies have a trigger. Every lie has a trigger. So if you're asking yourself, is this person lying to me? The first thing to understand is, why would they lie to you? And people lie for a lot of reasons. In my interrogation days, I would say people lie out of love, hate, and greed. And then there are derivations of that. I'm angry with you because you have something I want, envy, all those kinds of things, of course, lead to it. But that trigger point in the lie is key. If the person has no reason to lie, they could be lying to you for sport or from mental illness. But most people are going to keep their life as simple as they can and not go down that path unless there's a trigger. Then when they get to the trigger, they got to have time to fabricate whatever that lie is. And if you see, the reason we teach all this body language stuff is because if a person is rattling along and cadence is going like this and they stop, boom, 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 that means something. It could mean they're pausing to recall facts, could mean they're deconflicting something in their head, could mean any of that. Also, if they normally go along like this and they speed up after they get past something, I'm often suspicious of that. So cadence plays a part. Pitch, how their voice rises at the topic, indicates stress. There are no indicators of deception, only indicators of stress. So we look for deviation in baseline, in the way they speak, what they say, choice of words, how they string the sentence together. We look at all this other stuff, respiration and blink rate, changes in the big five, gestures, illustrators, regulators, barriers, and adapters. All five of those things we pay attention to changes in. So all the stuff we're teaching you on the behavior panel and here, all the stuff we do out in the academy is about that, looking for deviation in that person and asking why. The why is the key piece.
All right, here's one from James, and he says, hi, Scott and Greg. I've been into body language for a long time. I read a number of books, both yours and Chase Hughes. I feel like I know a lot of baseline gesture categories, et cetera, but my skill level in reading body language is still limited as I find it hard to focus externally, particularly because when I work in a medically busy healthcare environment, or I work in a healthcare environment, medically busy healthcare environment. Do you have any suggestions to improve external focus on others so I can use the knowledge I have and turn it into a skill? Please help. You want to go first, Greg?
Yeah, I always say the easiest way for you ever to get really, really good at body language is going to be for you. And everybody will tell you, if you look at one thing, you're missing the rest. That's okay. The way you get really good is by being able to notice one thing consistently. Remember, we say a neural path is caused by 10,000 repetitions. So if tomorrow all you do is pay attention to adapters, all you do is pay attention to barriers, if you focus on that until it becomes second nature and it screams at you when you see it, then life gets easier. And I always say, humans are simple creatures. We're process driven. Everything we do is a process. So if you can create that pearl and start to put layers and layers and layers on, your body language ability will get much, much, much better. And the reason for it is because all we are ever going to do is, if we're trying to do everything, we're never going to master it. But if we take pieces and we build on that, I'm a simple guy. I always say I learned most of what I know from the Army. The Army is really good at a thing called performance-oriented training. And what we mean by that is tasks, conditions, and standards. And what, in my exposure to people and trying to learn any task, you do it by picking enabling learning objectives, little steps that make you better. So my suggestion is, this might sound stupid, take a notepad, a Post-it note, a 3x5 card, whatever, and write on it one day, adapters. And go out and every day until they scream at you, pay attention to adapters. In a few days, you'll be surprised. They'll scream at you.
Yeah, that's great, man. And another thing is, like Greg was saying, don't worry about saying, oh, now I've got all this. I've got to go know every bit of it. That's tough. I've been doing this a long time. So has Greg, and it takes forever for that stuff to pop out with everyone you see. Because as soon as you start looking, oh, here, this, that, and that, and the other thing, that becomes the focus. And so your ability to observe at that point, when you're looking for specific things in that way, totally goes away. I mean, you're focused on those things, and you're not focused on everything going on around in that situation. So you can't keep everything in what the behavior you're seeing in context with what's happening around it. That's the most important thing. So if it starts feeling weird, and you may see one or two things, but don't focus as soon as you see one and say, oh, that means this or that. Just absorb it and start looking for other stuff. The key to that is, as you're doing this, make sure you don't look like you're looking at somebody, because that can get weird fast. One time I was working at a university in Nashville at Belmont, and I was watching these entrepreneurs. They asked me to come in and talk to them about pitching and their new product or service, whatever it was. And as I'm looking at them, this one girl goes, I think this guy's a foot freak. And I was like, what? Because what I'm doing is I'm looking for their feet are pointing, and I'm looking for how often they move up, they step back, what it looks like. So I'm looking at them all over the place. So now, and this was a few years ago, but now when I go do that, I have to say, look, I'm not, as I'm looking at you, I'm not like looking at you. I'm not a foot freak or anything else. I'm just looking to see what's moving, what isn't moving. I'll be seeing how much you're, how heavy you're breathing, those types of things, to make sure I can pretty much get a good idea of what you might be thinking, what might be bothering you, might not be bothering you, what you might feel uncomfortable with, or something you're not sure of. So if it looks like I'm looking in one spot on you, like your shoulder or your hands or something too much, I'm not obsessed with that part of your body. I'm just paying attention to that for a second because something caught my attention, and I'm watching that, or I'm waiting for something to happen there because I've seen something happen somewhere else. And I'm seeing if they're going to take that half step back or readjust or something like that. So as you're watching things, especially in healthcare, especially in the hospital, having spent a lot of time there this past 2 years with a member of my family, there's so much you have to watch, not only in the patients, but in the people with them. That's one thing I noticed. And the place that I was that they were so good about spotting what the families with the patients that were in the hospital long term, they were great at seeing that and going, oh, hey, you need this, you need that. And I know it's tough now because having seen that, it's horrifying in there these days how many people there aren't working in hospitals, how many nurses there aren't in there. Oh, it's crazy. I mean, it's unbelievable. So I feel for you. I know how you feel. I've seen it. I don't know it personally. I haven't felt that way, but having it seen on your kind, you people, man, it's tough. It is tough. So hang in there and look at just absorb stuff. Just look at it as a whole, and pretty soon you'll start zeroing in on things that stick out to you, and that may become your wheelhouse. You'll be able to tell a whole lot from just seeing a few things instead of seeing everything. We're just trained to see everything so we can, because of what we do for a living. But just seeing a few things will really make a big difference for you.
Well, and look, we didn't wake up one morning and our eyes see everything at once. We all learn the same way you're learning, and it comes together. Hey, Alicia has a great question. Scott, I'm going to answer this one because it's around eye accessing. Now, so many body language experts aren't sold on eye accessing cues as legitimate. Do you try to get verified through studies? This is a good question. Or do you just use it yourself since you verified as legit through personal experience or other? So, Alicia, a couple of things. When I first started learning this was so long ago. And I will tell you that we've talked to University of Louisville. We got to go back to them, Scott, try to get this fMRI study done. And I've got some fMRI slides in my deck from decades ago. I mean, literally decades ago when they first started doing this, showing, which part of your brain lights up. What we have never done is tie this. So, for example, when a person's recognizing words, which part of their brain is lighting up? Their temporal lobes light up over sound processing and that. What we've never done is go into the fMRI tube and connect eye movement to it. That's a piece that's missing. And so we'll go back to that University of Louisville and let's see if we can get that study done, Scott. But here's the key. What I'll tell you is the reason most people suck at this and don't think it works, and I'm not saying a particular person is right or wrong. Look, there's a whole lot of art to what we do, just period. It's stringing pieces together and paying attention to when a person is cueing. And the reason we always say the body language is not the determining factor in whether somebody's lying is because they're running processors in their head on a bunch of stuff. If I had a crappy morning, got in a fight with somebody at work, or, my dog is sick, that stuff affects body language too. But most places, when we ask a question, in most of the cases you see on the show we do, the reason you don't hear me say a lot about that's visual eye accessing, or that's because people ask such crappy questions that you can't. However, if you watch the one yesterday with Gwyneth Paltrow, there's a great opportunity to see some eye accessing where they ask her a question and then she drops her glasses. She comes back up and she goes into the narrative describing something she had seen. You get a really good visual eye accessing cue. Now, does it mean people always look to the same? No, not at all. Just like all humans, you got to figure it out. But you got to ask a single sensory question. If I ask you about a concert you went to, well, there's sight, sound, emotion, all kinds of stuff tied up in that. But if I ask you a simple question, are there tears in the seat of your vehicle? Then you have to rifle through your head. Scott, any tears in your new Traverse seat?
Not yet.
Yeah, no. But what about your old Traverse, Scott? Where were they? Where were they? But you see what I'm doing is we're asking a very specific channel and forcing him. Now, that's not a great question for Scott because he didn't care about cars. Like me, it's an emotional experience when I tear a seat.
Oh, you know where everything is. Greg knows exactly where the bird poop is on it.
But what I want you to know is it has to be mastery of questioning to get you there. And you guys all know, we say all the time, questioning is an art form. If you're really bad at questioning, you ask open-ended questions that are not sensory channel. When I go out to go after sensory channel questioning, I'm doing something specific to get a baseline for that, so that when I poke, I'll also use single sensory channel and go after it. So long drawn out answer. Yes, we are interested in doing studies to get this thing done. Yes, I've got fMRI images from which part of the brain is being used when you're answering certain questions. No, we do not have the eye movement map to it, and we will continue to work on that. But yeah, it's been useful for me. I can usually surprise people, even the guys on the panel, when I talk to them about eye movement, because I can predict what they're going to do because of years of experience with it. So long drawn out answer. You're going to find that all of us have beliefs that certain things work or certain other things don't. We probably have some that we don't think work that other people think do.
All right.
By the way, one last thing, there's an actual study called The Eyes Don't Have It. And what that doesn't say is there's no discernible pattern to eye movement. It says you can't tell if a person's lying by looking at their eyes. And it was about looking up left, looking up right. It was not about determining baseline, but just in case, go read it. It's a good study.
If you're watching this and you haven't seen us on here answering questions before, this is for the Body Language membership that we run. And if you want to go join or at least check it out, just go to bodylanguagemembership.com. That'll take you right there. And here's what it says. This is from Lisa. How often can you count on illustrators to be valid cues of deception? Well, illustrators are their own thing. Every thing that we talk about is its own thing. For example, illustrators, when you deal with those, the one thing that I look for is to make sure if somebody's illustrating properly, if they're saying, I did this, this, and this, to make sure that the word that's being emphasized is being emphasized at the right time. Instead of saying this, this, and this, and they said this, this, and this, then it doesn't mean they're lying. It doesn't mean they're telling the truth. It just lets me know there's something else going on up here. It could be some kind of inner dialogue they're happening. Are they working something out? So I look for something else. That's when at the same time I would look for an adapter right after that. Anything that happens within that 5 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds afterwards, that there's something up there. So I count on them because I talk about them a lot because they're the biggest things you see. They're the first things that pop out. So I always talk about them because the person beginning to learn about human behavior and body language can see that and go, oh, I see that because I see that all the time. So those are one of the things. Now, for example, when we do the behavior panel, watch Mark. His illustrators are always right on the money. Now, if he's thinking about something and he's working through it as he's getting to it, then they won't be right on the money. They'll be just a little bit behind because he's thinking up there. He's a great example to watch for something like that because he's mate and he's always up in the camera and stuff. So he's a great example to watch that. But look for the little subtle illustrators as well. Someone's head's telling you something. They do like this. They say, no, I didn't do it. Because like I always talk about, most people will think that's a head nod. No, I didn't do it is different than no, I didn't do it. So they're illustrating those words. No, I didn't do it. Instead of no, I didn't do it, which you wouldn't say that means they're lying when their head nods yes as they're saying no, but you take that as one of the 3 to 5 cues that help you start making a decision about whether they're being honest with you or not. Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Remember, there are professional communicators too. I'm going to use Biden because he's the guy in front of the camera right now, but you could use Trump with his way of doing. Any politician, especially career politicians who've been in this their entire life, they've got so many subroutines that they will be on even when they're not being factual, just because they're trying to deliver the message to whatever's on the prompter. And if you watch, for example, Biden, when he's on message, both hands are up. He's doing this. When he gets off message, one hand is up often. So it's interesting to pay attention and see what subroutines people have developed in their entire life. And some of us, because of what we've done for a living, punctuate more with our body than others. I'm a big hand talker, as you guys know. Scott always says, you tie my hands, I can't talk. And it's interesting because I come from Georgia where that's not necessarily the way we talk. So,
yeah. Let's see. If you got one, or I'll do one.
Oh, we can hop in here. Aaron Chase. Sorry, Aaron, for using the last name. But how do you stop yourself from calling someone out when it's clearly blatant that they're lying? You know what? I find it amusing. If you know and they know and you don't call them out, it's even more fun. If you just look at them and smile and look, people know when you're onto them because they can read it too. People who are blatant liars often are better at telling when you're onto them than those who are subtle liars because they do it all the time and they know when people are on them. I remember when I was a little kid, there was a guy that I went to school with who would look at people who were telling lies and just go, "You're lying." And, that gets you pretty alienated pretty quickly because little kids lie about all kinds of stuff for different reasons. But this guy would always call them out and people didn't like him a whole lot. So you got to be careful. Sometimes people lie for social reasons. And those social reasons, we always say everybody lies. What do they lie about? And how do they lie is the key. And is it malicious versus for sport or something else?
Yeah. And for me, oh, shoot, man. Sorry. I thought I had someone right after that. I like to know why they're lying because spotting a lie, that's one thing. I mean, that's great. If you can do that, fantastic. That's awesome. That's good. But as soon as you go, you're lying, then you miss out on finding out why they're lying. So you're actually, when you've decided, or you're pretty sure someone's not being honest with you, you're in the position of power at that point. Why let that go? Why let them know what you know? Because you can ask them other questions and you can get them lying down into a hole. Because if you know that they're lying for sure, you can ask them other questions about how they got there, what their mom thinks about it, whatever the thing would be. And you can just get them to lie, and you can observe everything they're doing. So the next time you run into it, if they're lying, it'd be much easier for you to figure out what their cues are. They're going to let you know and how they act from the normal baseline, especially if they're telling you something later on that is the truth and you know it's true. So you may not ever want to tell them that you know that they're lying. That's my take on it anyway.
Sadie has a great question. What are some common mistakes people make when they're learning to read body language? Let's just start with the number one. Absolutes. This means you're lying. That means you're lying. It's part of the reason this whole lie movement thing that came up earlier from Alicia is a key because we watch bad movies there's one called Basic where they said, if you look up to the left or up to the right, you're lying. Those are not true. And those are absolutes. We know a whole bunch of people say, if you scratch your nose, you're lying. If you cover your mouth, you're lying. We look for clusters. The biggest thing you're looking for in body language is to remember that culture trumps everything. And by that, I mean, if you go to the Middle East where people don't use their left hand to do a lot of signaling and you assume that means something, you've made a mistake. We have to take into account not just big culture, not just giant culture, but all the way down to microculture. And microculture is two people. If you have a couple and they're in a room, they're signaling each other with gestures and illustrators that mean something you can't read. You may project onto that. So the number one failure, all this absolutist, all this missing culture, all that is projecting what you want to believe, whether it's that somebody's lying to you or that somebody's telling you the truth. All of us have been deceived at some point in our life, including the best body language folks. And it's often because we want to believe something else. That's my opinion. Scott.
Yeah. All right. Here's one from Janina. And she says, how can we respond to people who say reading body language is nonsense because you can't get a qualification in it? You can't get a qualification in it. And how are you coping with the negativity that comes with exposure. You get that all the time. Everybody always says, you can't tell this or that. And for a lot of it, it's true. You can't just say, that's what Greg was saying about absolutes. There are no absolutes. Just because somebody does this doesn't mean they're lying to you. You'll hear people say all kinds of things that are absolutes. So it's just part of it, And when somebody goes, you can't do that, and I go, yeah, or I think you're full of it. I go, yeah, I get that all the time. What do I care? I don't care that what they think. It sounds horrible, but I really don't. I couldn't care any less about what somebody thinks about that. So far professionally, I've done fairly well with it. So it doesn't bother me. And the negative stuff about the behavior panel, we really don't get a whole lot of negative stuff. We do get in there, but it's the same one every time. What is the pseudoscience or whatever? I'm sure a lot of it is, because of the stuff you read in magazines and see in movies and TV shows. Before we started the behavior panel, I remember I saw Mark talking on a podcast somewhere, and Mark Bowden, and they said, what about body language experts? They asked him something about it. He said, well, there aren't a whole lot of us. And I was like, oh, here we go. He said, because most people are under the impression they know what it is. They understand, they think crossing your arms, and they think there's 5 or 6 things you look at. And he said, so there aren't a whole lot of us, but when we get together, we really like to hang out and talk. And I thought, man, and that's the first one of us, quote unquote, that I've heard say that. And he's right. There aren't a whole lot of people who are, and what I'm saying, we're elite. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is who study that and make sure they stay on top of it and know what studies came out in the last couple of months, where everyone's at on that. Is this still true? Or is it seen to be valid? Because for me, the most important thing is getting the information that's valid. Because if I give information to somebody and it's wrong, it might get them killed. So I have to be very careful about what I say, preach, if this happens. So I'm very careful with all that. I know you are too, Greg. And
just a couple of things, really guys. When we talk about this being pseudoscience, I don't think any one of us has said this is an absolute. When you get to where you're calling something absolutes, when you get to a point, what we know, and all I have to do is tell you a couple of things. Yes, there are parts of this that people will say are snake oil and that kind of thing. And anybody who's selling you on this and this and this, yeah, you should call that snake oil. But I'll give you my best example of why body language matters, just the simplest. What does that mean? Rolling your eyes. It has universal meaning in our culture. And even in other cultures, you'll see when people roll their eyes that they're excusing you, that you're released, that kind of thing. We were designed to read each other's body language. And what we're not saying is it's like any other language that has all the exact same pieces and parts. But human beings show stress. And when we show stress, and you guys all know it because you see it, when we show indicators of stress, there's a why question you should be asking. It shouldn't be a here's what it is. What I always say is body language opens the door to the next question, opens your mind to why is the person doing it? You guys will always hear me say, why? Single most important question body language should raise in your mind. It shouldn't close doors and tell you here's what's going on. It should make you say, wait a minute, why are you doing that? And you don't do that clearly out in the wild and call somebody on their own body language, but you may subtly do it and pick up why they're doing this thing. Why is the single most important thing that you should be learning based on when a person does this? You'll often hear me say it's not about body language, it's about communication, it's about behavior, all that stuff tied together, not just body language. Hopefully that's helpful. And I'm with you, Scott. If I teach somebody something, I want it to be based in fact,
Oh, yeah, it has to be. Because if not,
there's some of it,
all the hacks.
Well, there's some of it. Look, when you're talking about body language, the simplest thing for people to get across, to get in their head is look for what the person normally does and look for deviation. If you take that as your tack and then look for why that happened, you can't go wrong.
That's the Yoda of baselines, ladies and gentlemen. Greg Hartley. Oh, Lord.
I have a great gift I got to put on my wall. You guys, your insiders, will know why it's up there when it comes up. I've got a gift from a company I did work for, Constellation Software. I did a podcast with them, and they gave me this great gift. It's a hockey jersey. Yeah, let's see if I can get over there and get it without making too much noise.
Look at him scooting over the net. Nobody scoots around that room the whole time. There you go. Yeah, that's cool, man. Yeah, awesome.
Great gift.
Awesome.
I'll tell you all about it. But
Here's one. Oh, shoot. Whoops, I got a bunch of books here. I'm going to show you in a second.
So these guys gave me that for doing the podcast with them. And it's, the guy the thing he got from my whole conversation is baseline. Beautiful.
Here's one. Is the Dr. Phil bathroom story really true? Yes, it's really true. That's that bathroom, right? I'll tell a story real quick. So whoever hasn't seen me tell that story, I'll just go over it quickly. So I was at Dr. Phil's house and I needed to go to the bathroom. I need to take a whiz. And I said, hey, man, where's the bathroom? And he goes, oh, it's right in there. So I got to take a whiz. We got back. And he said, yeah, it's right in there. And he's usually in the office. I said, okay. So I go in his office and I go in and I take a whiz. And then after you do that, obviously you have to flush the commode, right? And I'd never seen a commode like this before. And it was like a round, it looked like one, but it was a little different. And then I figured, well, it'll flush itself, I guess because there was no handles. And I kept standing there and I was looking at it and nothing was happening. And he's right out there, right? I'm like, oh Lord, I don't know what he's going to think is going on in there, but I can't leave without flushing. So I'm down there feeling around the sides of the commode and stuff. I couldn't get it to flush. So I thought maybe it's voice activated. So I'm standing there talking to a commode going, flush, but not loud enough for him to hear it. So I'm whispering, flush at this commode. And then finally it flushed. So I guess it's maybe
toilet freak.
Yeah, not all about foot freak. I'm a commode freak. So, and here's another one about Dr. Phil. Let me do one more. What happens when you're on the Dr. Phil show? Do you sit in the green room with all the other guests like on late night talk shows? You want to go first on that one, Greg?
Yeah, look, we have been in the green room for specific shows when he wanted us to look at something. For example, there's a woman with the Innocence Project. He wanted us to watch her and then come out and talk, say what we saw. Most of the time they give you a little dressing room. And we gotten to the point by the time we left, they just put Scott and Greg on our door instead of our last name. So it was kind of cool. We got to know those folks and some really, really fun folks in the wardrobe in that area. And Terry in the wardrobe area would always give us a hard time about both wearing white shirts, that kind of stuff. So we got to know them pretty well and have a good time in the going out there and working with them and the producers and everybody else. You just get to a point they know you. Like anything else, when people know you, then you get a little better relationship and you get those things going. And they get guests who range from like people who had, the one lady we talked to had put her husband in jail erroneously, to us who are being there as kind of subject matter experts. So yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. But what you do is, if you're asking about what happens at the process once you get there, I think. Yeah. What happens on the so here's what you do when you first get there. Like, for example, we'll get a call. And so let's say we've decided we're going to go. So we'll get to the hotel and then they come pick you up the next morning. Right. So you go to the first thing you do when you get on the lot is you go get a COVID test. Then make sure that you're not.
I've forgotten that. Yeah.
Spread everything. So you go in there and now we know those people. So they're like, hey, and I always make a joke. You remember this? And they're like, yeah, I remember that. So they give you a COVID test and you go up to you have to wear a mask and you go up to your room and you wait around in your dressing room for about 30 minutes. So they come back and say, okay, you don't have COVID. And then after that, we kind of goof off for a while and then they'll come and get you to go to makeup. And Tina always does my makeup and somebody else does Greg's. And Annette does my hair on there. And boy, she had a lot to work with this year because I hadn't had a haircut in so long. What's up? If you watch that kind of stuff, watch that Dr. Phil episode because, man, my hair looks horrible. That's why I'm wearing this hat. And so after that, after you get your hair,
got a solution done, for you.
Yeah, I know you do. So after you get your makeup done, then they come and they mic you up and get you ready. And you walk downstairs and you walk over to the where the actual studio is. And you stand there, and then a guy named Christian will take you and go, hey, man, follow me, and you're going to sit here. You're going to sit here. Then we walk out and talk to Dr. Phil for a second, and then we'll get in our seats, and they come back from commercial, whatever, and there we are, and he introduces us, and there we go. But the one time, or a one time, we sat in that we were actually in the green room. Chase and I were in there last time watching for this last episode, watching whatever we were watching. Oh, the girl who thought she was the daughter of the McCanns. And one time Greg and I were in there because Dr. Phil said, I've got somebody here and she's been accused of murder. And we wanted, that's what you're going to talk about. We said, okay. So we said, listen, why don't you let us sit in the green room with her. Don't tell her while we're there. Right. We'll be in there. And when she shows up, we'll say, hey, what are you in for? Because when you do that, you want to know what they're there for. So I think our story was we were there because for a real estate transaction or something that had gone wrong and we'd been screwed over and Dr. Phil was going to fix it. So we were talking to her, and from talking to her, we realized she had no earthly idea pertinent details to this murder. And she didn't know where it happened. I said,
nice lady.
As we spoke with her, I even said, wow, murder, huh? She said, yeah, they think it is. We talked to her for a little while. I said, where was it in the town? Is it in your town? She said, yeah. I said, where? She said, I don't, it's on this side of town. I said, well, what are the stores around there? What kind of neighborhood is it? She said, I don't know. I haven't been there before. She didn't say there's an Arby's there, there's a this there. So right away, we're like, holy, so you got to check those things out as well, because we're not interrogating, we're just getting a baseline on her. But we came out with the understanding that she had nothing to do with it.
Yep. And this was an Innocence Project thing. And the lady had been in prison for a long time, imprisoned in her high school years. And she was, I believe, 40 and was released. So, yeah, that was a good one. And we just went in and talked to her. We didn't cover story or that kind of thing. So it was good. Hey, a couple of really good questions that are out here and simple. The eye accessing, Linda, you asked about neurodivergent people and eye accessing differently. Look, I can't really speak to that really effectively. I can tell you I worked with a guy for a documentary called Neurotypical. And the only thing I saw consistently in the people who were on the spectrum somewhere along the way was lack of forehead involvement. The only thing I could say that I saw consistently. And, I've not questioned enough people to get eye accessing cues. I know a lot of times neurodivergent people may not make as much eye contact. So tough, but I would poke. And then here's a great question. This one came in from Sadie, and it came from someone named William. Can AI be an effective interrogator? Well, the question you have to ask yourself with AI is, what is AI going to do? Look, eventually AI will be a better interrogator than human beings because it will not project eventually. If it becomes a sentient being, of course, then it's a different story. But if you're watching the news right now, guys, the big tech players are saying, back up, take a moment, because humans are creating AI. And if humans create a jaundiced AI, then we get something horrible on our hands. But what we know is that people lie in certain ways. Word pattern shifts. If you look at all the stuff that guys do around word pattern changes and that kind of thing, those are indicators. Voice stress analyzers can be part of AI, and those are great indicators. Pulse rate, all these things that we're looking for, you could teach AI to look for. There's a human part of what we do that is the motivation piece that, I'm sure machines can learn that. But what we have to be careful about is projection. So if a machine gets to the point that you've got all this stuff, then certainly. There's a guy named Donald Marks out of Birmingham, and I've known this guy for years now, who is using fMRI to indicate deception. He looks at engrams. It's a whole cluster of brain function things going on. And he has created engrams that can indicate deception on a level that we can't see. So yes, in the long term, machines will become very effective interrogators. It's just a matter of how you use them.
All right. And here's one from Ben. Do you tend to do adapters only when you're stressed or uncomfortable, or will your favorite adapters become habit and bleed even when you're fine? Adapters are just something natural that happens. Some people see them more often in their parents and people they hang out with as they grow up. So they're like Germanic folks. Theirs are huge. Italians are really big. So a lot of it is how you're raised, I think. So some are natural and some aren't. But I think you can pretty much count on them for existing. And somebody who doesn't move a whole lot as they talk, that's normal too. But you'll see that, but there'll be illustrators, but they'll be a lot smaller and they won't be as big. Some people are shy and just don't move a whole lot. Greg?
Yeah, a couple of things for me. I think the single category of body language that's most likely to become a habit is the adapter. Whether I twirl my fingers, I do that because it's creating comfort and taking control of the unknown. If I do this, it feels comfortable. It makes me feel more comfortable. The other thing is it's probably the one that is most unique to you because you get in the habit of doing something. And if you don't know what yours are, you talk to your spouse, they'll tell you get into habits too. I mean, your partner, your spouse, your business partner, any kind of partner you can look at. If you're doing something all the time, it can become such a routine that you don't even have to have stress to do it. So that's why I say it's baseline. You see us all the time looking at a baseline. The person does this all the time. Exclude it. Paltrow, blank, 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 blank. Yeah. That's baseline. So we had to look past it.
There's one thing I do sometimes on the behavior panel. If you'll watch that, somebody wrote in and said, "Oh, Scott, you should get checked for Parkinson's because it looks like this sometimes because I'm just jiggling my leg. Not that I'm bored, but it's just something I do all the time. And when I do that, I start jiggling. It looks like something's wrong with me." So sometimes you don't even, you know what you use adapters. And I'm not lying about anything. I'm not stressed about anything. I'm just bored. I'm not bored, but I'm just waiting. And just that's what
Adapting.
I do.
As I always say, an adapter makes the uncomfortable comfortable, the unknown known. It gives you control over your environment. It's all you're really doing. And if you really want to see an example, put an animal in a cage and they'll pace because they're adapting. They're doing something that's comfortable. When I worked here, you always guys hear me talking about this. When you put people in cages, they adapt more too. So you see it. It's a way of making yourself comfortable. It may be this or that or touching yourself wherever. Got time for a few more. Let's get them in there. Okay. Hi, Scott and Greg. This is from MJ. Hi, Scott and Greg. When recording episodes for TBP, what are some of the things or classic behaviors reference the other panel members that will make you crack up every time when interacting with them or observing them? Look, the good thing for me is I really try hard not to baseline people I care about. And these are my friends. This is one of the better work partnerships I've had in my life, and definitely a bunch of friends. Mark is inevitably going to make me laugh at least once in every episode because his observations are so different from my very military observations and the things that come from me that he's going to make me laugh out loud at least one time every time. And he knows it, and I can perceive it coming in his baseline. I can see that little amusement starting to rise in the side of his face. And I'm like, okay, here comes something that's going to be fun. So that's the one I would tell you.
But usually I try not to look at Chase because I know as soon as he goes like this, he's getting ready to laugh. So I don't know why, but when he laughs, I know something's funny and I've missed it. So I start laughing too. I get shits and giggles and I can't stop doing it. So I try not to look at him because I know something has just happened, or he can see something's going to happen, or he can see something coming and it's going to be funny, or he wouldn't be laughing. I've got a story that goes with that, but I won't tell it. I shouldn't even brought that part of it. Said I had one. But that's why I like that.
Couple of really good ones in here. You got one you want to hit?
Yeah, go ahead because I'm still looking. I've got
let's talk about Jim asked, when analyzing body language, I forget to focus on the voice. Can you talk about what you listen for when profiling someone? What's your checklist establishing a vocal baseline? I find auditory to look, big old ears, little bitty eyes. You can figure that I'm an auditory guy. So I pay attention to what a person says. And it's not, look, if you take 4 simple elements, if you say diction, which is the verbal piece, that's my choice of words. Anything that's out of sync, any word that doesn't fit their vocabulary should raise a red flag in you. Not because it means they're lying, but because it means they've either prepared it or it's an important word to them and they don't even know how to use it half the time. And I've got lots of examples in the classes we put together. But verbal piece, then you've got the vocal piece. And the vocal is the voice. Your mind's all cracky today from this garbage I'm dealing with. But when we talk about vocal, we're talking about pitch, tone, and cadence. Cadence is a normal rhythm of speech. I'm a fast talking, always have been kid, rattling along. If I slow, something has changed in my head. If I speed up, something has changed in my head. Now listen for that. So that's cadence. Pitch is, there's a guy named John Lovitz who made an entire career out of one joke. Yeah. When he would do that when he's lying, he raised his voice.
That's what makes me crack up.
You hear the Three Stooges, right? Yeah. But when that voice raises, that pitch indicates something. We associate vocal fry with that same kind of pitch. So there are 2 different directions your voice can go in that situation. You're paying attention to that. Tone. I don't have to tell you this because you can finish the sentence. It's not what you said. It's how you said it. Downward intonation is telling. Upward intonation is asking. We know those. And then, so we got pitch, tone, and cadence and verbal. All those tied together should give you kind of a polygraph of things to notice that are different in the way the person speaks, because that indicates something is different inside their head.
Okay. Now, from my perspective or point of view, what I do is I listen to the kind of words they use. If they talk about, some people will will talk in visual terms. That looks good to me. I see what you're saying. They'll talk about colors and the scene and those kind of things. So that's a visual person. And you've got people who are kinesthetic people. That feels good to me. That looks a little bit rough. That situation looks rough. So it's how things feel or how things sound. I hear what you're saying. That sounds good to me. Those kind of things. Now there's that part of it. Then there's the part where people talk and what I call loping. As they're telling the story, they're just kind of loping along and everything goes very smoothly, not very many pauses in between it. Everything just seems to be going well. And the picture they're painting or the story they're telling seems to be going very smoothly. In my situation, for me, if I was trying to watch that, what I do is when I talk, there are big gaps when I'm talking because I'm thinking a lot about what I'm saying and what kind of words to use and structure my sentence and all those. So I'll stop and sometimes uncomfortably long in the middle of a sentence as I'm thinking. And then as I'm doing that, I'm sort of paying attention to the story I'm telling so I can make that picture happen in your head. Now, if I'm interrogating or if I'm mad, those get very smooth because I know exactly what I'm going to say. And I've got that lined up already. And I don't pause and I don't lope. It's more of a straight thing. Greg's the same way. When he gets a little upset, his thing comes on very straight too. There are no pauses, no gaps or anything. Even though he maybe have a pleasant look on his face, I can tell when he's a little bit upset because of the way, not just the tone of voice, but what he's saying and how he's saying it. Just like you were saying a second ago, Greg. Even though it sounds fairly normal, there are no gaps in it. It's just this really tight flow of information that comes out. So I look and see if they've been having these breaks in between their sentences, or if they're flowing all of a sudden. What has changed at that point? Going back to Yoda's baseline situation. So those are the things I take in it, what they're saying and then how they're saying it, was basically what Greg said, but from a different perspective.
Yeah, Scott, we got time for one more. There's a great one in here, and I can't cover it all in this little segment, but I will kind of give you what it means. He asked about energy direction and focus and why that's important. Because of this is something I developed years ago for paying attention to people, to give you kind of a table for what to look for. People, by their very nature, when we say energy, it's high or low, because when a person is feeling down and depressed, they're low energy. When they're feeling animated, high energy. There can be lots of reasons. Agitation can cause you to have high energy, or excitement. So what you're going to look for is, are they agitated? Are they excited? Where does that energy go? So direction means, is it internal or external? When a person is feeling bad, they're low energy and it's internal, there's depression. You see that kind of thing, and a person's feeling sad. And then focus is scattered or laser-like and narrow. And all I do is take all of those three elements and say, if you pay attention to these things and see deviations in these, you can learn a lot about where a person's going. A lot of body language absolutists are not going to pay attention to things like that because they're not thinking about the impact of the psyche. They're thinking about just, this means that, and this means that. That's why we say this is a lifelong learning. I'm learning things every day about people and why they do things. And look, the best thing about aging, and there's the only one good one I can think of, best thing about aging is that you learn new things because your body and your brain and your emotions and all that stuff are different as you age. It's one of those things that things alter as you age and you learn new things. It's the only good part of it I can think of. I don't really care for the other side effects. But there you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you want to join Body Language Membership, go to bodylanguagemembership.com and join up. I'm going to go in later today in the membership, and I'll do a Zoom thing. And whoever comes in and wants to Zoom, I'll put a link up. And it is 11:30 a.m. now, Eastern Standard Time. So I'll go in at let's say 1:00 Eastern Time. And whoever. So
Scott, one last thing. In the next 10 days, I'll put up part 2, the bonding and fracturing tools for Maslow. Okay. And then we'll do a couple of workshops like we did last time. And if you haven't been in those things, we load up the Academy with things around some stuff that's in our books, Liar's Loop, stuff from the True Crime Workshop, things from Body Language Tactics. We load those up in the Academy so you can go through and work at your own speed too.
All right. Well, thanks for coming. Thanks for hanging out with us. And we'll see you in a bit.